QuitSmokingWeed.com, the podcast on Spotify.
A few days after you stop, well, your body starts acting like something is fundamentally wrong.
Yeah.
Can't sleep, you snap at absolutely nothing, and food has zero appeal. And there is this persistent, low background hum of anxiety that just won't switch off. I want to be clear right up front. Nothing is wrong with you. This is just your brain recalibrating. It is a highly predictable biological process. Today, we are exploring what weed withdrawal actually feels like. We are going to cover why every single symptom happens and why understanding the cellular mechanics makes the whole experience survivable.
There is this really destructive myth that we need to dismantle right out of the gate. People often believe that struggling after putting the substance down means they are mentally weak, or maybe they assume they're somehow failing at recovery.
Yeah, I recall that gray feeling. You just think you are broken.
That is a very common reaction. But the reality is that roughly 47% of regular users notice withdrawal significantly. If you are a daily or heavy long-term user, experiencing this is the rule. It is not the exception. Feeling off does not mean you are doing it wrong. It simply means your biology is reacting normally to a sudden chemical deficit.
So we need to look at the machinery behind that deficit to understand why you feel so awful. What exactly is happening in the brain when someone stops their daily use?
Well, the human brain runs a complex network. It is called the endocannabinoid system. This system acts as a master regulator for your mood, your sleep architecture, your appetite, and, your stress response.
Okay, so it touches pretty much everything.
Pretty much, yes. And to keep all of those functions balanced, your body produces its own natural cannabinoid. It is called anandamide. Anandamide is what keeps your baseline stable on a normal, uneventful Tuesday. The disruption begins when you introduce a daily external supply. Smoking daily floods those exact same receptors with THC from the outside.
I think of the brain like a factory that produces its own goods. In this case, it is manufacturing anandamide.
That is a very accurate way to look at it.
Right, so suddenly a competitor starts dumping free, high-powered product right on the loading dock every single day. That product is THC. The factory manager looks at this massive influx, realizes they do not need to manufacture their own supply anymore, and simply shuts down the internal assembly line.
And then, the day you quit, that external delivery truck just stops showing up. The supply drops to zero overnight, but your internal assembly line is still completely shut down.
Leaving you with empty receptors and no product to fill them.
Yes. That gap between the external supply stopping and the internal factory getting fully back online is what we call withdrawal. It is not a character flaw. It is a biological system running on empty while it slowly rebuilds its natural production capacity. Every single physical discomfort you feel in those early days traces directly back to those empty receptors.
Because the system physically altered its structure to accommodate the THC.
Precisely. Reversing that structural change takes time and energy.
Let us trace those specific physical discomforts. Sleep is usually the first casualty, is it not?
It almost always is. You might be tossing and turning for hours. But when you finally do fall asleep, the dreams are incredibly intense. Sometimes they're even deeply disturbing.
I know a lot of people wake up completely exhausted because their brain felt like it was running a marathon all night. Why does the brain react so aggressively when you try to sleep without the substance?
This occurs because THC actively suppresses REM sleep. That is the cycle where most of our dreaming happens. When you remove that chemical suppression, your brain experiences a phenomenon known as an aggressive REM rebound.
Meaning it tries to catch up all at once.
Yes, you enter the REM stage much earlier in the night, and you stay in it much longer than a normal sleeper would. People often reach night 3, and their body is physically exhausted, their eyes are burning, but their mind is racing and projecting these wild, unfamiliar dreams.
It makes total sense that people would panic. Waking up in a cold sweat from a hyper-realistic nightmare feels incredibly alarming.
They frequently misinterpret this as a sudden panic disorder, or a sign that their psyche is unraveling. It is actually your brain forcefully catching up on years of suppressed dream cycles. The dreams feel disturbing largely because your brain has forgotten how to process that level of vivid nighttime activity. It is not because your mind is permanently broken.
It is just a mechanical backlog being cleared out.
Exactly. It is entirely biological.
Then you have the temperature fluctuations and the appetite loss. Waking up drenched in sweat, experiencing random daytime chills, and finding that the thought of eating a normal meal makes your stomach turn. How do those empty receptors translate into physical sweating and nausea?
Well, your thermoregulatory system is deeply intertwined with the endocannabinoid system. When THC leaves, your body temporarily loses its internal thermostat.
So it just overcompensates wildly.
It swings between hot and cold as it tries to lock onto a stable baseline temperature. And the appetite issue is driven by the same empty receptors. The specific nodes in your gut and brain responsible for signaling hunger and reward are sitting completely empty.
Food literally feels like a chore.
Because the biological green light for digestion and pleasure is not firing. You might even wake up with low-grade nausea. The digestive tract is essentially stalling, waiting for chemical instructions that are no longer coming.
The headaches are another major physical hurdle during this early window. Are those just a side effect of not sleeping well and not eating enough?
Lack of sleep and food certainly contribute. But the headaches stem from a few overlapping biological causes. Your brain is experiencing significant changes in blood flow. THC causes vascular dilation, meaning it actively widens your blood vessels.
So when you stop, they constrict.
They constrict back to a narrower baseline. That sudden shift directly causes tension and pain. There is also usually a degree of dehydration involved, which makes every other withdrawal symptom exponentially worse. Plus, people often unknowingly change their caffeine habits when they quit.
Oh, interesting. Like drinking more coffee because they're exhausted.
Or drinking less because their stomach is upset. That secondary shift triggers caffeine withdrawal on top of the chemical recalibration.
Well, looking at all these intense physical reactions, it seems perfectly logical to me that the first few days must be the hardest hurdle. Once you get past the night sweats, the headaches, and the crazy dreams, the worst has to be behind you.
I actually strongly disagree with that assessment.
Wait, really? Why is that?
The physical wave is highly visible, and it is unquestionably exhausting. But it is not the hardest phase. People can wrap their heads around night sweats and nausea. They can point to those physical symptoms and say they are clearly sick, which allows them to grant themselves some temporary grace.
They know what a flu feels like, so they can handle it.
The true danger comes later. It happens during the phase when those obvious physical markers fade and the deeper emotional reality sets in.
Let us talk about the start of that emotional reality. The ambush often begins with shocking irritability. You might find yourself with an incredibly short fuse, snapping at people over minor inconveniences or feeling intense anger over a dropped pen.
Your nervous system is trying to function without the daily buffer it relied on for years. Emotional regulation depends heavily on your dopamine and serotonin systems. THC used to heavily influence those pathways.
It acted like an artificial shock absorber for daily stress.
Without it, you are entirely raw. It is vital to know that this hyperreactive state is not your new permanent personality. It is simply a nervous system firing without its usual chemical insulation.
The sudden anxiety follows a very similar mechanism, does it not?
It does. Many people believe cannabis was actively treating their underlying anxiety, so when they quit and feel terribly anxious, they assume they need the substance just to function in society.
When in reality, the substance was just muting the signal.
When you stop, the mute button is instantly removed. The anxiety signal starts blaring at full volume. Your brain hasn't yet ramped up its natural calming mechanisms to handle the noise.
It creates this humming, persistent restlessness in your chest.
It is highly uncomfortable, but it is fundamentally temporary. Once your system fully heals, your baseline anxiety often drops below where it was before you quit. Long-term use actually amplifies baseline anxiety by forcing your body to constantly adjust to the artificial calm.
So the physical sickness fades, the raw nerve of the first week or two starts to dull, and then you hit the resilience phase. This is the part almost nobody warns you about. You expect to wake up feeling amazing, sharp, and clear-headed.
Instead, a completely flat, gray feeling sets in. Food is fine, but it is not satisfying. Conversations with friends feel hollow.
You aren't actively suffering in the way you were during the night sweats, but you aren't feeling pleasure either. You are just existing without the color.
We call this anhedonia. It is a core feature of the resilience phase. Cannabis artificially elevated your dopamine responses for years. It trained your brain to expect massive chemical rewards for doing absolutely nothing.
So the brain adapts to that daily flood by physically reducing the number of active dopamine receptors, just so it doesn't get overwhelmed.
This is neuroplasticity in action. Your brain downregulates the receptors.
Meaning, when you finally remove the THC, you now have far fewer receptors available to catch normal, everyday amounts of dopamine.
That is precisely the mechanical issue. Your reward system is desperately trying to restore its natural baseline, but it has fewer satellite dishes to catch the signal. A normal sunset, a good meal, or a joke with a friend simply does not trigger enough dopamine to register as pleasurable yet.
You are experiencing the stark reality of a biological system resetting its sensitivity.
It takes significant time for those receptors to upregulate or physically grow back to normal, healthy levels.
You also get hit with a heavy brain fog during this window. Trying to hold a complex thought feels like wading through wet concrete. Your processing speed drops, you lose your train of thought mid-sentence, and your memory feels slippery.
This specific combination of the gray, flat mood and the heavy brain fog makes the resilience phase the primary danger zone for relapse. People misinterpret this flatness.
They look at their life, feel absolutely zero joy, and assume they have caused permanent neurological damage.
They convince themselves that quitting was a mistake and that they will never feel happiness again without the substance. They think this gray reality is their true, unmedicated baseline.
We need to be very clear about the realistic outlook here. Recovery does not happen in a few short days. The healing takes around 7 weeks with proper support, up to about 3 months on your own.
That is the time frame. Understanding that this gray phase is a temporary biological necessity is the only way to survive it. It is just the internal factory slowly turning the assembly line back on and building new dopamine receptors.
The timeline is not a rapid fix. Treating it like a sprint leads to profound disappointment.
The resilience phase is the hardest part precisely because it requires serious endurance. It hits when the initial motivation to quit has completely burned off. You have to walk through the daily flatness knowing that the machinery is repairing itself in the dark.
While you are navigating that flat stretch, you also have to deal with cravings. We need to redefine what a craving actually is. People expect a constant, relentless pull, like a physical hunger that never stops gnawing at them.
But that isn't how it plays out in reality. Cravings are situational waves. They are built around specific cues you have established over years of use.
It might be walking past a specific street corner, coming home from work at a certain hour, or hearing a specific album.
The cue fires in your environment. Before your conscious mind even registers it, your brain prepares for the chemical influx. You suddenly feel wired, agitated, and desperate for the substance.
It sounds exactly like a conditioned reflex.
Sure.
The brain recognizes the setup and demands the payoff.
It is entirely Pavlovian. Feeling a craving is not a sign of mental weakness or a lack of commitment. It is an ingrained neural pathway firing exactly as it was trained to do. The crucial thing to remember is that these cravings operate on a strict curve.
They build, they peak, and they recede, usually within 10 to 15 minutes.
Your brain eventually realizes the chemical delivery isn't coming, and the physical urgency drops back down.
Most people feel the instinct here is just to grit your teeth, lock the bedroom door, and fight the craving until it submits. They try to outmuscle their own brain through sheer willpower. How should someone actually handle that 10 to 15-minute window?
You do not fight a craving. Fighting it just focuses all your mental energy on the exact thing you were trying to avoid, which only amplifies the distress and makes the craving feel stronger.
So you just let it happen.
You just wait it out. You acknowledge the physical sensation in your body, you recognize the environmental trigger that caused it, and you let the wave wash over you and break. Distraction works, changing your physical environment works, but brute force resistance usually backfires.
You are simply letting a temporary chemical wave pass through your system.
Yes.
You also mentioned support earlier. There is biological support that actually helps while you are waiting out the larger recovery timeline. You can't speed run the neuroplasticity, but you can give your body the right materials to function better during the repair phase.
For sleep, magnesium glycinate and CBD oil target different mechanisms of the disruption.
Magnesium helps calm the central nervous system, right? Reducing that physical restlessness and the twitchy feeling in your legs.
And CBD supports the remaining anandamide activity without binding to the receptors in the intoxicating way that THC does. It provides a gentle biological buffer while your internal factory is offline.
What about movement? Getting off the couch feels physically impossible during the resilience phase, but it seems critical to the recovery process.
Afternoon exercise is a massive tool for recovery. Sweating and elevating your heart rate improves your sleep architecture through biological pathways that are entirely independent of the endocannabinoid system.
You are essentially using your muscular and cardiovascular systems to force your brain into a state of physical exhaustion that overrides the REM disruption.
For the daytime anxiety, clinical evidence points to lavender. Specifically formulated lavender oil has been shown to reduce anxiety without the sedation or dependence risks associated with pharmaceutical options.
It offers tangible relief while your natural calming mechanisms slowly recover.
It does.
The entire process we have discussed follows a recognizable biological arc. The acute physical drop, the emotional raw nerve, the flat anhedonia of the resilience phase, and the gradual return to normal. It fundamentally ends.
The symptoms you are feeling are not random. They are highly specific to the receptors that are currently empty, and they are not permanent.
Yeah.
When you understand the mechanism, you remove the panic.
You stop wondering if you are broken and start recognizing the discomfort as the literal sensation of healing.
The system was severely suppressed. Now it is demanding to be balanced. Every symptom, from the sweat to the irritability to the gray mood, is tangible evidence that your body is fighting to return to its natural state.
Even on the days when you feel completely flat, unmotivated, and stagnant, your brain is actively rebuilding cellular receptors in the background. The internal factory is putting the assembly line back together. The healing happens whether you can feel it or not. If you want to know where you actually stand, take the free self-check at quit-smoking-weed.com.